everyone. There we go. Some of you know who I am. My name is Rachel Smith. I am a clinical associate professor in the Department of Communicative Disorders. Thank you all for attending this Major to Career panel hosted by the Center for Career and Experiential Education. That's a mouthful. This panel, as we know, is going to be recorded, and there will be access to this later on if you want to refer back to it through the YouTube channel available through the center. I wanted to first thank all of our panelists for attending today. And I wanted to start by asking each panelist to please introduce yourself, use your pronouns if you choose to do so, and just give us an idea of your current position and title. And since Jennifer's to my right, you win. So if you go first.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Fraskowitz-Taylor. Can you guys hear me okay? I guess my current role is I'm the owner of a private practice specializing in early intervention and assistive technology. And then my other role is I work PRN, so just kind of weekends and as needed shifts as an inpatient speech pathologist at a inpatient rehab center in Washington, D.C.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. Next, Dorian.
Good morning, everyone. It's going to seem a little strange that I'm actually on this panel because my stepping stone of this degree did not end up taking me where I currently am. So I am not in speech pathology, haven't been in many years, but it led me to where I am now. So I currently have dual roles. I work as an accessibility consultant at Harvard University. In addition, I'm also an adjunct professor of deaf studies at Carolina University. So I do both. As far as the work at Harvard, it centers mainly on ADA Section 504. It's semi-compliance based and also a lot of initiatives to increase accessibility across campus.
Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, May.
Good morning, everyone. My name is May Edwards. I also do not work in speech pathology currently. I am a certified child life specialist at a freestanding children's hospital in Boston.
Great. Thank
Another
you.
Bostonian, yay!
Yeah. Some of us New Englanders don't go far. So, that's wonderful. Next, I'd like to be able to ask our panelists to tell us, as you feel fit, about your career journey since graduating from URI. What position did you start in? How did you enter into the role you're in now? You've kind of gone over that a little bit, but kind of those steps and journeys as you went through. And if someone feels so moved to speak first, you can feel free to do so.
Sure, I will. Like I said, it's been a very convoluted journey. And I've been doing this a ways. So I graduated from URI in '96. But please don't do the math. So that puts me in my 50s. I've been doing this work for quite a while now. But I started out in speech path, loved communication disorders, but then I was doing a lot of the diagnostic stuff, which I didn't really love. And I always leaned a little bit more heavily towards audiology because I love the hearing stuff. I was already using American Sign Language. I was always fascinated with deaf culture and that kind of thing. And so that was mainly my motivation, but it never led me to where I wanted to go. I eventually felt like I had hit a dead end and returned to go back to get my master's degree. And my first semester, with my intention was to get my master's in speech pathology, and I tanked. I had a very kind professor who was talking to me and was like, I don't think this is where you need to be. And I was telling her about this job that I had. I worked at a school for the deaf at the time, and I just really loved it. And she's like, you want vocational rehabilitation, not speech path. And I was like, what's that? And she walked me down the hallway to introduce me to the department head for voc rehab, and I never looked back. I loved working with that demographic much better. So I have worked I worked for about 15 years for the state of Rhode Island Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, and then the job at Harvard came up, and I had that opportunity. And since I've been at Harvard now for about 10 years, and the job in higher ed, I love it. I don't ever want to go back to state rehab, although it's a great job. But so that's sort of where I landed, where I am today. And then this job at Harvard is a very niche thing, and it's less about the pencil pushing case management kind of thing. And it's more about doing larger initiatives and project work regarding accessibility, which I also love. And I realize it's kind of a unique thing, but I guess if that's until you start doing different things, that's when you're going to start to figure out where you fall and where you love. That's my mini story.
That's great. I think it is great for our students to hear more about how communicative disorders can be a great jumping point for other stations. Obviously, speech language pathology is a great next step, but there are so many other opportunities. So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else feel like sharing their journey?
I can kind of go off of that. So like I mentioned, I am also not working in speech pathology. I kind of came to discovering child life while I was finishing up my senior year at URI. I graduated in 2017. And I only found out about child life because I had a family member who knew someone who was a child life specialist. I was talking about things that I really wanted to do in my career. I knew I wanted to work in healthcare. I really had a passion for working in pediatrics. I wanted to be able to work one-on-one with children and really meet them where they are. But I graduated in 2017. I ended up taking that year to kind of work different jobs and really narrow down what I wanted to do. So I substitute taught that year. I volunteered at Hasbro Children's Hospital to learn more about child life. And then I also worked with adults with addiction and mental health. So that really helped me pinpoint that child life was something I really wanted to do. I ended up going for my graduate degree at the University of Akron. I graduated in 2020 and I started working at a different hospital before coming to my current position now. But yeah, I can kind of echo the like taking the things that you know that you like and you want to do and finding a better match for that. There are so many jobs in healthcare. I think volunteering is a great opportunity to actually get into the environment and see firsthand what these jobs look like, because there's a lot out there that I think is just not known to the vast majority of people. So if you're feeling like maybe speech pathology or audiology isn't the exact fit, but you know you want to work in healthcare, there are a lot of different avenues you can take.
Great, thank you, May. That was perfect. Jennifer, anything to add to this?
Yeah, I loved what May said about just that there's a lot of different opportunities. I kind of definitely went the more traditional route. I've been a speech pathologist worked in schools, I've worked in nursing homes, I've worked in spinal cord injury, inpatient, outpatient, a little bit of everything. I joke that I've been everywhere but a jail. But I feel like if I had known more about healthcare, I probably would have ended up into nursing, or into child life, but I wasn't aware of those or didn't really know the facets of those careers. But what I do love about speech pathology is there's so many different career options, like settings. If you don't like one setting, go explore and find another one. Like I said, I did kind of do the more traditional path. I actually was born with a speech impediment. I didn't talk until I was 5. My parents had to sign forms saying I was mentally retarded in the state of Rhode Island, ironically, in the 80s, and that I would age out of special ed and be awarded the state's custody when I turned 22. Obviously, there's still some words that I get stuck on at times, but was in the last speech therapy. And that's kind of how I ended up here. I was always passionate about like education. I was thinking about special ed. And then my mom was like, what about speech? And I was like, I hated speech. I hated being different. And here I've been 16 years as a speech therapist. So I graduated in 2006 from URI. I had a really hard time getting into a graduate program. I was waitlisted I was not, yeah. I had a hard time getting into graduate school. So originally I was thinking, okay, I'm going to take a couple years off. Maybe I'll go into early childhood education. And then 2 days before classes started, I ended up getting accepted into a program at LaSalle University in Philadelphia. So I moved my life from my parents were living in Connecticut to Philadelphia and graduated with my master's in 2008. My goal was always to work in schools, but somehow ended up in an outpatient pediatric setting and kind of followed that path. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit my story.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's a story of perseverance. I know graduate school and applying and getting accepted to graduate school can be definitely a challenge and nerve-wracking. But kind of sticking through it and maybe coming up with the next step or next plan or making moves to maybe be able to reapply, things like that. It's really that's really important for our students to understand. Thank you for sharing. The next question I have is, I think one of the ones that I actually really want to know is if anybody is able to describe their typical workday. What do you guys actually do in your roles? What do you find most rewarding? What's most challenging in this current role that you have?
You want to just keep going in the same order?
It works for me. If it works for you, that sounds good.
Sure. Well, there really isn't a typical day for me. So that's for starters, but that's one of the things that I really love about my job. So, like I said, I have dual roles, so I'm not really going to talk about the teaching one. I'm going to talk mostly about my work at Harvard, because the teaching one is pretty much what you would expect. I have a group of students, I teach courses, and so I'm a multitasker. At Harvard, my role is split. So when we're dealing with accessibility, it's interesting that even though I'm at a university and I have to do with all of these things that have to do with disability, my work actually isn't usually directly with students at Harvard. It's working as a consultant to maybe human resources, or I might be working with local managers, anyone that might have questions about disability. And usually our office is the one that responds when things start to escalate and things start to get complex or sticky. So if someone just needs, I have a student who has a learning disability and they need time and a half on tests, I don't see that stuff. They manage it at the local level, and that really doesn't have anything to do with me. However, if we have someone with a really complex disability, or we have employees who have a disability, or someone feels that they've been discriminated against and they file a complaint, our office manages all the grievances for the university. So I put out a lot of fires before they become worse. So there's a lot of conversations. So a typical day, actually just looking at my calendar today. So after I'm done speaking with all of you, my next meeting is a housing committee meeting. So a bunch of people sit on a board and we evaluate accommodation requests for students who are asking for accommodations in student housing. And so they ask for our subject matter expertise on how to sift through all of that. Later today, I'm also doing a couple consultations with a few managers. I have a couple of situations that are kind of pre-grievance, and I'm doing some fact finding. I have to do some report writing, and then I'm also doing some team stuff, and I'm doing a training. So that's today, but then there might be other times where it's a little heavier on one thing, or I might be doing some project-based work. So that's, like I said, not a typical day, but I like the fact that it doesn't change. I like the fact that it's very challenging, because when you're dealing with situations like that, obviously it's very difficult constantly having conversations with people who are upset, and there's problems that need to be solved. I joke with people that there's not a lot of happy people coming into my office. They're coming to me because they have a problem that needs to be solved, not because they want to give me a pat on the back and tell me how great things are going at the university. So that can be really tough, but oddly, I like that work, and I find it, I am my own worst enemy when I am bored. I know that about myself. So I would say, if anything, get a sense of like, where do you thrive? What are the things that really This is the voc rehab counselor in me. Well, because I also did a lot of like exploration with people finding jobs who are underemployed. You know, find what makes you thrive. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to fit in a perfect category. I know that I have some real vocational quirks where I almost do better when my hair is on fire. So I like to multitask. I need to be in the fast lane. I need to have a lot going on. And as soon as I get bored or things get a little bit too easy and I get a little complacent, that's sort of my undoing. So this is a good match for me, but that might be not a good match for everyone else. Other people don't like stress and would prefer to be in something that's a little bit more predictable, and that's okay too. So I'd say, look, those are the things you really want to ask about when you go for job interviews.
So Dorian, you never collect dust, is what you're saying. You're constantly moving, constantly from one thing to the next, it sounds like.
Yeah, there's no, but that's good. And I also, I'm very, one thing I did have another job in between, as I mentioned, before I went back to grad school, I had a little bit of a life crisis and I wasn't sure what I was doing. And I was like, well, if this master's degree thing isn't going to happen, I got to do something else. And I ended up working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, believe it or not. So did that for a while, worked my way up, made great money, had a company car, did the whole thing for a couple of years. And then I realized I'm not motivated by that. Like, I made good money, but like, you know, everyone was like, yeah, we were like in the top 5 this quarter. And I'm like, okay, great. And I was like, that's not what motivates me. What do I want to be doing when I'm 40 years old, 50 years old, etc. 25-year-old me had enough insight to know that that wasn't sustainable. And that's when I went back to school and then finally got my head on the right path and knew what I was doing. But it took a little trial and error for me to realize that that wasn't it. I wasn't interested in the money. I get the satisfaction out of seeing when someone has access to our building, when someone feels that they're welcome at our university, when someone feels that they belong there, I feel like my job is done.
That's great. I know this panel isn't about me, but I also was a non-traditional student where graduating an undergraduate and then saying, I'm not quite sure, took a little bit of time, worked out in the field for a little while, and then came back to graduate school knowing and feeling a little bit better about what I wanted to do. And working those couple of different jobs actually helps you figure out what you're good at or what you like out in the field. So encouraging people to discover what works best for them is that's great. Thank you, Dorian. All right. Hey, did you have anything?
Yeah, so I feel like it's kind of the same thing of my day is different every day. I think that's kind of just the nature of working in healthcare. And it's definitely what I really enjoy about my job. So in my current role, I work in an intensive care unit. So I will say my typical day looks different than child life specialists who work in other areas of the hospital. We do have child life in basically every corner of the hospital. The same went for my last job. So the interventions and what those look like differ. I would say my typical day, I come in, I, check my emails, I look over my census and see kind of what the patient census looks like and what acuity is there. And then I prioritize based on my own assessment skills of what patients need to be seen. And I also go through referrals throughout the day. So different members of the medical team can consult me through our charting system. And we also have phones that everyone in the hospital uses to communicate. And a lot of the interventions I do, we do a lot of like diagnosis education. So talking to children in terms that they can understand about kind of why they're in the hospital, what's happening while they're here. And we use tools like play, we use resources like social stories, and make sure that we're breaking down medical diagnoses into language that children can understand so that they can have a level of confidence and mastery over their own experiences. We do a lot of procedural support, so coming in during stressful procedures or things that may be hard for children and providing play and distraction. And that looks different for every child based off of their own preferences, what the distraction is. Sometimes it's looking at an I Spy book or playing a game on an iPad, singing songs, really doing anything that the child chooses as part of their coping plan. We do a lot of sibling support, so helping siblings also understand more about why their brother or sister is here at the hospital, using social stories, facilitating visits at bedside, explaining what medical equipment is, so that way they also have their own level of mastery and competence. We do a lot of like therapeutic play, normative play, making sure that children have opportunities for things that they would be doing at home to try to help normalize and promote positive coping while they're here in the hospital. And then I will say a unique aspect of my role working in an intensive care unit is we do provide a lot of support for patients and families at end of life. So going in and meeting families while their child may be approaching end of life, providing keepsake items for them, and then also helping them with resources and things if they have other children at home, because it's a very difficult concept for, I think, a lot of adults to understand and fully understand and cope with. And so we understand that that's also very difficult for children. I think our role looks different, our interventions look different. There's a whole variety of different things that we do every day, but overall, the main goal of all of our interventions is to support coping. So what may be stressful for a child is different for every situation, and then what is going to help them get through that stress is different in every situation. So really using our assessment skills to better understand where that child is, what tools are going to help them, and the ways that we can support them in those moments.
Thank you. You must be tired at the end of the day. So I
It's
almost wanted to
definitely
say,
busy, but
say
yeah.
that again.
It's busy, but it's good to be busy. I'm definitely someone who likes to be on my feet and go, go, go. I'm not a huge fan of sitting at a desk and doing office work. So I will say like charting is not my favorite part of my day, but being able to be bedside with patients and really meeting kids where they are is the best.
Really big. Wow. Thank you. That's a long day. Jennifer, do you have anything?
Yes. So currently right now I have a private practice, so my schedule is a little bit different, but previously I did work at a outpatient clinic in pediatrics, running an AAC clinic, and that was more of a typical, well, not typical, but 10 to 12-hour days, seeing patients every hour on the hour. So definitely more of a typical schedule. I have a young child at home with some medical needs, so I had to pivot from that position because I needed a little bit more flexibility given his medical needs. So that's great about this field, is that there's definitely lots of different opportunities and different settings to kind of meet where you are in your life. So after I do this, I'm a military spouse, and I live in Washington, D.C., so near a lot of the military bases. So I have 3 clients that I will see on the military bases in their homes. One child has autism, and we're working on using a communication device to help him communicate. And then another child is an early language learner. And then my third client has working on articulation. And then I'll end my day with a virtual client who actually is an eye gaze user and has a Tobii Dynavox device to communicate, and he's 6. And we'll do that session through telemedicine because they live in a pretty rural area of Southern Maryland. So again, just being able to have diversity. I think I'd be really bored in a desk job. I hate doing admin as well. I want to be rolling on the floor with the kids and just be really active. During my role, when I work at the inpatient rehab center, that is normally on weekends. Again, I have that position right now. It works best with childcare with my son. My husband's home on the weekends, so I'll work. Those shifts are usually about 8 a.m. till 4 or 5 p.m. We have pediatrics and adults in the inpatient rehab unit. With some of the peds, I'd be working on dysphagia or communication, and some of the adults, it's a little bit more cognitive linguistic therapy. So again, each day is kind of different, but I like it that way.
That's great. I'm actually going to ask a follow-up question to all of you, because Jennifer, you mentioned 10 to 12-hour days. May, you mentioned just some really heavy heavy things that you're working with, dealing with every day, helping families through potential loss. And Dorian, you're talking about you've got people coming into you and they're not coming to you because they're happy. They're coming to you because they've got a problem or they've got a concern. In your positions, do you find a good even work-life balance? Are you able to, are there days where it's really heavy and then days where you're able to kind of take a little bit of a break? Or what is it, just kind of for fun, what is it that you do that helps you kind of unwind from these types of situations that you're in? And if you've got anything, I just kind of came to me as a question.
Yeah, I think that I hesitate to say that it's inherent to the job as more that I have learned how to respect my own boundaries over time. Because I was very prone to burning myself out when I was younger because I was afraid to say no. I was afraid to set limits because I was afraid that someone would think that I was not as good, I was not a rock star employee, etc. But you have to know what your boundaries are and you have to respect them. You have to know when to back off. So I've just gotten much better about doing that over the years. But yeah, I mean, there's still some days, I mean, there are some aspects of my job that I love that help with that. I will say that Harvard is really good with work-life balance. My team is very respectful. So, if my kids need something and I need to step away from my desk and I need the afternoon, like nobody questions that. No one has ever made me choose. And I knew I had the right job when I met with my original director, when I took the job, and I asked her about what is the work-life balance at Harvard. And she said to me point blank, I will never make you choose between your job and your family. And I was like, I love you. That's where I want to be. And that's been true. No one has ever made me choose between, and not that this isn't true for all parents, but for moms in particular, it's kind of a virtual tug of war where we always feel like, if we're working, then we're not with our kids. And if we're with our kids, there's work that's not being done. So it kind of stinks in that way. But, and as you can see by my background, I work in my home office most of the time. So I am on campus and I go to Cambridge one day a week, but the rest of the time I work from here, which helps enormously for me to juggle my time. So if I need to step away because my daughter needs something, I can just walk away and they're 2 steps away from me. So that helps a lot.
I think that work-life balance is something that is a skill that I really built as I've gone further into my career. I think it's really about, like Dorian said, about respecting your own boundaries and kind of holding those firm. So I will say it is hard on some days and it can be a very slippery slope of staying late and helping with just one extra thing before you go. But I am very lucky to be part of a supportive team. So I'm one of 3 child life specialists who work in the ICU. And we're all really supportive of one another, helping to make sure we're out on time, holding each other accountable for that. And when it comes to actually going home and separating myself, it's a skill that I really have worked on. So I make a point to not have my work email on my personal phone, not looking at work things when I'm not at work. But it's something that I've had to be stricter about over the years because it does lead to burnout. I will say in my last job, when I was on vacation, I would look at work emails and things like that. And I made it a point when I started this new role that I was going to hold the boundary between work and home a lot stronger because I don't want to burn out. I love my job. I love this career. And it's something that I want to be able to maintain for many, many years. So those boundaries are in place, not just for patients and families and things like that, but also for you. So it can be hard, but definitely a skill.
Yeah, I think it's important to create those boundaries early on. Kind of learn from me. I feel like a work-life balance is now definitely it's more talked about, whereas I feel like 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't. It was just kind of expected in our field to push, push, push. But the key is you have nothing to give if you are running on an empty tank. So I will be honest, I have experienced burnout a couple times. And I do think it's important to find other hobbies, other things that bring you joy, because you can't bring joy to others if you can't find it yourself. Maybe that's in traveling. I used to run half marathons, just running, whatever finds joy, find that wherever you can. Because again, if your cup's empty, you have nothing to give. But again, these are, they're long days. They're not always easy, but again, I think in this field, there's different settings that fit where you are in your life at that time. I had worked in inpatient units before and had done long days. Now, I'll see 3 patients today, but they're scattered across the day, and I have flexibility. You might hear my son pitter-pattering upstairs. So I have the flexibility that I can move my appointments around depending what his needs are, which are great. So again, but I think, yeah, just being setting healthy boundaries is okay, and start it early on, because if you don't take care of yourself, who else is? So easier said than done, but I think it's important. And I'm also a huge proponent of, I think it's okay to be in therapy and for yourself too, and to get help for yourself as well, whatever that might look like.
Thank you all for sharing that. I kind of went off script there, but I feel like as people, anybody who's in the communicative disorders this is their major. It's all because we're helpers, right? And so it's that line between, wanting to help others and then forgetting to help ourselves. And so you guys all made really great points about boundaries. And I think that that's something that information is just very valuable to our students. So thank you for sharing that information. Kind of switching gears a little bit. And this might be tougher for some of us to remember just because school and your time as in the communicative disorders department was a little bit ago, but are there specific skills or experiences or certifications that can make students more competitive for positions within your field or organization? Meaning, do you remember anything specifically from your time in undergraduate, or anything that you feel and now that you're seeing of people coming into your field that would be helpful for them to have or pursue, or to have?
Well, my answer is a little bit of a non-answer in that I would say really drill down and figure out where you want to be. So for example, as I mentioned, I'm not in speech path anymore, but I did do voc rehab counseling, and we do have a national certification as well as local certifications, which is the CRCC or the CRC. I got my CRC and had it for a decade, and then I recently let it lapse because at Harvard, nobody cares. It's irrelevant for the work that I'm currently doing. So, but in some places, I wouldn't be able to get a job without it. So if I wanted to work for an insurance company, if you look at any of the job postings, one of the first things it says is that you have to have a CRC to be able to do that work for them. So it depends on what you want to do and where you want to go, and look at the geographical area. So for example, I know in New York, CRC is highly valued and it's sort of a prerequisite to work in state rehab. And you actually get more money if you are certified. Whereas in Rhode Island, where I was working for ORS, they didn't care. It didn't make a difference. It wasn't required, nor did it add anything to my salary. So just, figure out exactly what you want to do and what's gonna lead you there to keep you competitive. If it's something that is required or preferred, that could be the thing that wedges you out from someone else. So that you don't want. But do a little homework in between LinkedIn and whatever it is. There's so many things online and networking that you can kind of figure out, like, what do all the competitive people have right now for this job that I want? What is your dream job, and what does the perfect candidate have? Echo that, and then you'll be good to go.
I think when it comes to like getting different experiences, that would be my biggest piece of advice. So volunteering is a great opportunity to learn more about working in healthcare, and specifically for child life. Volunteering is oftentimes a prerequisite for a lot of like the clinical experiences like practicum, internships, and even entry into some master's programs. So volunteering in a hospital setting is always great. There's also a lot of camps that are offered for children with like chronic illnesses or grief camps. Those are a really great opportunity. And then I also think when you're looking at your classwork at URI, making sure you're taking a variety of classes. Human development classes are always a great option. If you know you want to work in healthcare, you're always going to learn more and build kind of your understanding of children and just like psychology, how we work with together. I wish I had taken a couple of more human development classes. I actually, in my graduate degree, had to go back and take a couple of extra child development classes. So I think that's my biggest tip as you're looking at your coursework, your curriculum, that you're really creating kind of a broad spectrum of classes you're taking. Obviously doing your like prerequisites, your required classes, but also finding ways to get other curriculum in there so you can just be a more well-rounded student and a more well-rounded candidate.
I think my advice would be to push yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit and kind of just be okay with taking different opportunities. I really thought I wanted to do schools and work with children with hearing impairments. Never thought I'd want to end up in medical setting. And then I did a practicum in a nursing home and loved the medical setting. Wasn't a fan of adults, but loved the medical setting. And now I specialize in medically fragile and medically complex kids. So you just never know what one opportunity, where that might lead you. So yeah, I think just pushing yourself in your comfort zone, taking different opportunities, and again, looking into different volunteer opportunities. I was the president of NISHLA when I was at URI, and I also volunteered with AmeriCorps and Jumpstart. So just looking into different opportunities and not being afraid to push your comfort zone.
Yay, AmeriCorps.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you all so much. And that's the coursework, the help with, the looking at the certifications. There's a lot that students are trying to take in and say, oh gosh, what do I do with all of this? So that's really great. I know a lot of our students are actually HDF minors. So, they're on the right track or are taking a look when you've got that one extra course that you don't know what to take. Hey, take an HDF or a counseling course or something like that can really help as well. That's all I have, but what I'd like to do now is actually open the floor up to students. If you have specific questions, I would love for you to turn your camera on and actually ask the questions out loud. But if that just is not in your wheelhouse, you can also use the chat and we can send some questions out to our panelists. If you want to just turn your camera on and turn your microphone on and ask, that would be wonderful. Or you can put anything in the chat. Anything is fair game for our for the group here.
I was going to say, I was actually a psych minor. So, and I think
Hey, me
having
too.
some of those counseling skills are great for wherever you end up. Even like Dorian said, I'm sure you probably had to counsel some people at Enterprise. Just some of those extra skills can help you almost anywhere.
I took so many psych classes it turned into a minor.
We kind of build on that. I think I tell my class every single year, if you have the opportunity to take a counseling class, I don't know if it's a requirement in a lot of graduate programs, or anything like that, but if you have that opportunity, just being able to actually talk with someone and interact with someone or be able to mediate, is probably the most valuable skill, no matter what job you have.
Yeah. Interpersonal skills are so important. Even from just interacting with someone at the airport or the supermarket, you just never know where you will meet people and where they'll be.
Do you remember any of your favorite classes here? Oh, I'm going to let someone else answer, Jocelyn, because as I mentioned, I graduated in 96. So I honestly don't remember any of my classes.
My senior year, I took a bowling class. It was a single credit. My parents were not really thrilled. They're like, we sent you here to be, tough academics, science driven. But they were like, know what, you're senior, this is your last semester, enjoy yourself a little bit. I think my anatomy and physiology class was probably the most It was hard. It was really, really hard. School wasn't easy for me. I definitely have some learning disabilities, but I think the one thing to remind yourself that no one's going to ask what your GPA is 10 years from now. It's about getting that degree and getting the skills and knowing where to find those resources as well. No one's expecting you to be a human encyclopedia, but as long as you are like, hey, let me phone a friend or let me check on that. It's all about how you kind of handle yourself and being able to find that information.
I actually do remember two classes I took that I loved and I feel like are really helpful for the job I do now. One was Perspectives on Parenting. I don't know if it's still offered. I believe it was a human development class. I thought it was great. I loved my professor. It was really interesting to learn about the different approaches to parenting and the impacts it has on children and family dynamics. I think that's great if you're going to work with families in any setting or any capacity. And then the other class I took that has been really helpful in my current role is there was a thanatology class that was offered. It's a lot of times like nursing students, but I think if you're going to be working in a healthcare environment where you're going to come across like bereavements or end of life, it's really important to kind of explore that as a student while you have those supports in place.
Yeah, and to echo what Rachel said too, if there's any classes that are like having tough conversations, how to navigate, that kind of thing, regardless of where you land, I think that's one of the hardest skills to develop in this field, because there's always going to be parents that you might have to talk to, or a client that is the work that we're doing, is that we're helping people, and so they're going through something, and having to have that perspective of, well, and also we can easily get desensitized to these things because we see stuff every day, and I think, stay humble and realize that, like, we've seen something a million times, but the client that you're working with has not. This is all very new to them, and they're navigating something new and difficult. And so being able to just have a really good conversation with someone and navigate really difficult situations is a skill that needs to be developed. So then the skills, then there's certain ways to really actively listen and to respond to people and to be present when someone's talking. Those are things that you really need to learn.
I second that because most of the time, no one really plans on coming into speech therapy or child life. No one plans on coming to the hospital. I think those are just really good skills to have because, again, like healthcare, no one really planned on we didn't think there'd be a pandemic, but we ended up working in an inpatient unit. We were firsthand involved in very tough situations. So again, having those skills are really important because you just never know where your career will take you.
And I see that there's a question from Melinda about, can I go back after I get my BS right away? Are you able to do these kind of careers with just your BS? You can, but you also need to find the right place where your skills are going to be warranted. And depending on what your ultimate goal is, maybe it's a short-term goal. So before as I mentioned, I had a little of a hiccup along the way and wasn't sure where I wanted to go. I ended up working as an SLPA for a number of years, basically speech language pathology assistant. So I basically did everything that an SLP would do. I just had to work under the supervision of an SLP. And that was when I worked for the School for the Deaf. I only had my bachelor's. I was working directly with students. I did all of the same work. She just had to approve everything that I was doing, and I would meet with her and she would supervise my work. So that is absolutely a possibility. Just depending on your ultimate goals. I don't know if that's where you want to be forever and a day. So maybe it's like a stepping stone while you're working towards something that at some point you can return, because obviously you're limited in scope of what you're able to do until unfortunately, it's one of those fields that without a master's degree, we're kind of limited in what we can do because we can't practice independently.
I think we have time for one more quick question that's in the chat. Amanda asks, do you have any recommendations of ways that we can get experience in speech path while in undergrad?
I think volunteering, you might Also, shadowing is also a great opportunity. You might not directly be able to observe speech therapy, but again, just human development, child life, child development. Like I said, I did AmeriCorps. I worked in a literacy program called Jumpstart. I'm not sure if it's still around or not, but again, that learning literacy skills was able to carry that over to speech pathology.
Students are constantly looking for ways to get that experience, especially if grad school is not that next step, to get some experience in doing things and really get some, some names under your belt in terms of potential experience for jobs and for a resume moving forward for applications. So I want to personally thank all three of you, Jennifer, Dorian, and May, for joining us today, taking an hour out of your very, very busy days to answer the questions for our students. I know that I appreciate it. I know that they've learned a lot today, and we just hope that you can come again some other time to be able to chat with us. This has been really valuable. So thank you so much. Holly, do you have anything else that needs to be added?
No, thank you. I'm just, I have recorded attendance. Students, if you're on the line and if your Zoom camera only says your first name or says Holly's iPhone, please update that or take a minute and just put your last name in the chat so I can actually make sure you get credit for attending this morning. And then we will send out the recording. Rachel and Karen, I'll probably send it to you guys so you can share, and we'll be in touch afterwards. But thank you so much to our guests. We appreciate having you.
Thank you all. Have a great